Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Melinda Nusafora. It's been 3 weeks since the United Nations declared we may be witnessing the beginning of the end of the Yemen war. During UN-brokered peace talks in Sweden, the Saudi-backed government and Iranian-aligned Houthi rebels came together at the negotiating table for the first time in 2 years. But the fragile agreements they struck are already fracturing, with reports the Saudi coalition is recruiting child soldiers to fight their proxy war. Caitlin McGee explains.
It's not their war, and this is not their homeland. But it's alleged thousands of Sudanese teenagers are fighting Saudi Arabia's battles in Yemen. The New York Times has reported that Saudi Arabia is recruiting child soldiers from the troubled African nation, paying children as young as 14 up to $10,000 to join their proxy war. Some of the returning soldiers told the newspaper that anywhere between 20 to 40% of the Saudis' military is made up of child fighters. In a statement, a spokesman for the Saudi military denied the claims, saying the allegations that there are children among the ranks of the Sudanese forces are fictitious and unfounded. For 4 years, Yemen's internationally recognised government, with the backing of a Saudi-led coalition, has been fighting Houthi rebels who are aligned with Iran. Both sides came together in Sweden last month for United Nations-sponsored peace talks, the first time the warring parties have met in 2 years. Their agreement on a plan to withdraw all troops from the vital Hudaydah port was heralded as a victory.
I sincerely hope that we are living the beginning of the end of one of the biggest tragedies of the 21st century, the conflict in Yemen.
But 3 weeks later, any goodwill they fostered appears to be evaporating. Houthi rebels insisted they've started withdrawing troops from Hudaydah port, but government soldiers say they're lying.
The Houthi rebels claim that they have handed over the port, but they haven't handed over the port. They haven't delivered anything.
The talks about handing over the port of Hudaydah is a farce directed by the Houthi militias and with an international cover. According to the Swedish agreement, an aid convoy was supposed to be allowed to leave.
That convoy was due to transport 32 tons of flour to the rebel-held capital Sana'a, but a Saudi coalition spokesman says Houthi militia blocked the road and prevented the aid from being released.
If this happens again, then the whole ceasefire process is a farce, and we will not be silent about it.
Not a particularly positive backdrop for a prisoner swap, which is scheduled for the end of January, and another round of peace talks expected early in the new year. Caitlin McGee, Straight Talk.
And joining me now is Vebi Baysan, who is an assistant professor at Ibn Khaldun University, and coming to us from Sana'a, Suze van Meegen, who is a protection and advocacy advisor with the Norwegian Refugee Council. Suze, I'm going to start with you over there in Sana'a. Thank you for joining us. The Saudi military has denied that it is using Sudanese child soldiers. The NRC has had a presence in Yemen for more than 5 years now. What has your organisation seen? Have you seen any evidence of this?
Well, the evidence we see on the ground is broadly of the impact of the humanitarian crisis at large. There is significant evidence to show, including in the UN report of last year, that both parties to this conflict are using children as part of their military forces and violating international law in various other ways. We are not in a position to make an assessment on the number of child soldiers being used. We're not in the business of making accusations, but what we are seeing in any case is that there are violations certainly continuing to happen, including in spite of the current agreement in Hudaydah.
On that agreement in Hudaydah, Vebi, let me ask you this. When the Rimbo peace talks wrapped up, there was a real sense of optimism that we were going to see change and we were going to see a real positive engagement in dialogue. But since then, one of their pivotal pieces of that puzzle, the withdrawal of all troops from Hudaydah, already appears to have fallen apart. Politically, do you think anything has changed on the ground in Yemen?
Well, unfortunately, what we see as a success is that those sides actually managed to sit around the same table. I mean, this is, from one point, yes, success, but from the other, it's embarrassing because we have a serious humanitarian crisis and there is struggle reaching humanitarian aid there, but more importantly, you have also humanitarian or human rights abuses. So, and neither side kind of really doing enough or establishing enough efforts to really prevent this happening. So, in that regard, the Hudaydah agreement, yes, the agreement success, but then on the ground implementation of it is, I think, having serious setbacks. And probably, it's my personal opinion, no one knows yet how to achieve that. But the urgency there is that humanitarian aid should reach, and people or any sides fighting on the ground should understand that this is a necessity. And as always, this war will not have any true winner. That's the problem.
And a lot of the people who are losing out, Suze, are the locals and the innocent civilians. The World Food Programme is threatening to suspend its assistance to Yemen because of reports that Houthi rebels are stealing food aid. Since the Rimbo talks, has there been any improvement at all in humanitarian terms?
We're very conscious that the agreement on paper is only as good as what we're able to see on the ground, and the period of time that we've had pass so far is not necessarily long enough for us to see a dent in the humanitarian crisis. What we have seen in recent weeks is a huge number of Yemenis returning to Hudaydah, to their homes in Hudaydah, but I don't think we should necessarily see that as a sign that people have confidence in the agreement, so much as a sign of desperation, particularly as the cold weather sets in Sana'a and other areas to which people fled. So we certainly, while we maintain some sense of optimism about the agreement, we have seen a significant decrease in the amount of violence in and around Hudaydah. We still need to see a huge amount more from both parties to the conflict. And we need the international community to recognize that this crisis will not be solved immediately. It will take years and significant investment to make up for the damage done.
Have you seen any improvement with the distribution of aid? Has there been any sort of sense of unblocking these roads and these humanitarian corridors that were talked about during the Rimbo talks? Have you seen any more aid flowing than what you did before the Stockholm round of talks?
Certainly from our perspective, we're not seeing any significant improvement on that front. I think while we're feeling optimistic, we are not feeling that with any naivety to the complexities of continuing to deliver aid. We need parties to the conflict to recognise that it's not only about opening those humanitarian corridors, but ensuring that our staff have the permits required to travel, that our shipments are safe as they move through, that aid is not being diverted, and that international humanitarians can access the visas that they need to get into the country. So we need to see significant steps forward, and I'm afraid we haven't yet seen those.
And Suze, I'm just going to ask you also, with regard to that World Food Programme allegation that Houthis are stealing food aid, is that something that your organisation has witnessed or seen any evidence of?
Well, our organisation, the Norwegian Refugee Council, works very closely with the World Food Programme, and we work in different areas of the country than some of our other partners. But consistently, over 3 years of war, we've seen efforts from both parties to the conflict to control or divert or influence the way humanitarian aid is delivered. We haven't necessarily seen any changes of late, but this is something we're very, very familiar with in Yemen and something we're pushing very hard to see stop so that we can continue delivering aid in a manner that is principled. We do not take sides in this conflict. We're only concerned with seeing civilians receive the goods they need.
Mm-hmm. The prisoner exchange that was agreed to during the Rimbo round of talks is expected to occur in a couple of weeks, and then soon after that there is scheduled to be another round of peace talks. How confident do you think we can be that either or both of those can go ahead as planned, given what we've seen in the last few weeks?
Well, actually, that may not serve the purpose, because yes, prisoner exchange something is a good step forward to establish the confidence and trust between, which is much needed.
And that's what they really phrase that as. This is a trust-building exercise, but there doesn't seem to be any trust
yes,
now.
that's the thing, because either side, or let's say Houthis, may think that actually by just getting what they want, their kind of field commanders that arrested under arrest, so released, then they may think that actually this is enough for us and we can continue our armed struggle in their views. So I think the problem here is that I remember 2 or 3 years ago there was a UN report in January, but was it 2015 or 16, that actually there was around 56 million weapons, guns, actually circulating in Yemen. So if you don't really minimize that, the conflict will continue. Another thing is, I think, creating international pressure, both sides may produce some, this is not the interference to the domestic issues, but actually kind of really establish enough trust and confidence, maybe choose some representatives of other sides who could be, in a way, decision makers, or actually their decision would be respected back in the field. So that is the main problem. So whoever is representing Houthis may go abroad, and then when they come back, actually no one takes care of if there is no benefit, because it benefit in the decision. So actually concessions got to be accepted in both sides, and international community should make this to be understood locally, and otherwise the peace will never be established. But also we should go back to the roots and of the problem to sort it out, how it started.
Yes.
So if we don't address the cause, actually trying to sort out or help the symptoms will not really help the sort out the problem or reach a mutual or decision in Yemen.
Well, the UN certainly still hope that this is the beginning of the end to the Yemen war. I guess time will tell when we get to this next round of peace talks to see whether any more progress can be made. Vepi, thank you for joining us in the studio. And Suze van Meegen from the Norwegian Refugee Council, thank you for joining us from Sana'a in Yemen.